want to thank everybody for making it out here today. My name is Michael Eisenstadt. I'm an assistant professor in communication studies and the director of forensics here at Cal State Long Beach. Not CSI, but forensics is in our competitive speech and debate programs, which travel all over the country, just like any sport that you have ever watched or heard of. And we're among the nation's top-rated speech and debate programs. So I'm happy to join events like this one, where we get to expose some of the principles of argumentation and debate to some of our student body. Before we move forward, I want to thank a few groups and individuals. I want to thank you all for coming, of course. I want to thank Cal State Long Beach and ASI for helping to fund this event, facilities for setting up and providing space for us here in the USU, the University Honors Program for recognizing this as an honors event, Beach Forensics for providing speech and debate resources, including a little bit of consulting and trial and error before this event, the College of Liberal Arts and the Communication Studies Department for their support and advertising the event. And I'd like to recognize the Vegetarian Club Sees Animal Torture for organizing the event, and the Minorities in Philosophy Club for helping make this event possible. If you are here because you are doing so on behalf of a class and you have not signed in for that class, those sign-up sheets are available outside at that table just out the door. And there are full programs available, should you need one, on the Facebook event page for today's event. Now, today our panelists will be debating about the future of our dinner plates. Specifically, they will be debating Resolved: Americans should keep all animal products off the menu. Arguments that you'll hear today will be divided into three subtopics: nutrition, ethics, and the environment. And I'd like to introduce each of our panelists before we get started. Harmonie Hernandez is a sophomore at Cal State Long Beach pursuing a bachelor's degree in political science with 2 minors in communication studies and marketing. Hernandez also competes on the beach forensics team in both speech and debate. At her first national tournament, she competed at the varsity level with no prior experience and still won several debates against competitors who had been doing this activity for 8 or 9 years. At her official rookie debut tournament of this season, she and her partner advanced to the championship round and each earned the 3rd and 4th individual top speaker accolades. Brianna Bashford is a locavore and steward of the San Bernardino Mountains she calls home. She grew up in the suburbs of Denver, Colorado, and has loved animals from a young age. Her childhood passion developed into a professional passion as she received her BS in Fish, Wildlife, and Conservation Biology, studying global sustainability and environmental education from Colorado State University in 2015. During her education, she learned about the merits of eating local and being responsible for her environmental impact. Heartbroken by the low quality of life for livestock and traditional agricultural systems, and armed with her education, she laced up her boots and went hunting for an ethical meat source. She is now engaged in the California statewide effort to educate the public about the relationship between conservation and hunting and fishing through the California Department of Fish and Wildlife's R3 movement, sharing her story to aid in the recruitment, retention, and reactivation of hunters, anglers, and outdoor enthusiasts for the betterment of all species. Owen Hablitzel works internationally as an independent ecological design consultant, group facilitator, and an educator to collaboratively empower whole systems transformations toward robust ecosystem health, social co-creative capacity, and whole landscape stewardship. His clientele include nonprofits, ranchers, NGOs, universities, farms, government agencies and ministries, and other land management and policy planning groups. Being born and raised in California's San Juan Valley, the area of highest agricultural density in the world, and with 14 years of non-cheating vegetarianism experience in the past, he may offer some particularly experienced perspective for technologies towards enacting transformative reconnections with and regeneration of healthy landscapes. A certified educator and Savory accredited professional of holistic management and a director of the Permaculture Research Institute USA, Owen also serves by invitation on the Resilience Task Force of the International Union for Conservation of Nature, Committee for Ecosystem Management, and holds a master's degree in Eastern Philosophy from St. John's College in New Mexico. Over here we have James Marin, RD and EN, a holistic registered dietitian, business owner, and author who specializes in using whole plant foods as a form of medical nutrition therapy. James has used his knowledge of food and the environment to help hundreds of his patients prevent and reverse diseases like type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and a variety of gastrointestinal issues. His approach takes into account family, stress, nutrition habits, the environment, and work life to come up with a tailored approach for each of his patients. Brian Rubenkamp, together with his fiancée, Anna Valverde, are those annoying vegans on Instagram and YouTube. Vegan since 2016 and animal rights activists since 2018, the two migrated to Los Angeles in their 20s with the Hollywood dream of becoming actors. The couple co-organizes animal vigils in the LA area, and most recently, Anna and Brian toured Europe, attending the official animal rights march in both London and Amsterdam, and participating in various forms of activism in 3 countries. Currently, they live in Sherman Oaks, California, and are still pursuing acting careers on top of their rigorous activism schedule, volunteering regularly at Kindred Spirits Care Farm, hosting their YouTube channel, and managing their Etsy store, Instagram, and Facebook pages. Oh yeah, and they also have day jobs. Last but not least, Molly Basler is an activist and environmentalist, climate reality leader trained by Al Gore of the Climate Reality Project. She's created the Green Dream campaign, asking the entire Democratic Party to go green and sustainable, including vegan and organic options at all events. The Green Dream campaign launch was the first ever Democratic event that was vegan and plastic-free. Molly's also president of her company, Conscious Living, which offers yoga, meditation, and vegan cooking lessons. She wrote a promo vegan cookbook, the Yogini Linguini Vegan Cookbook, and has created a line of vegan organic lemonades, Yogini Ginger Clove Luscious Lemonade and Pineapple Ginger. Molly believes in the Green New Deal, a green economy, and the Green Dream future. Her life is dedicated to helping create all of that become a reality, and plans to run for public office in 2022. Now, the debate will actually begin. We'll start with a 1-minute introduction of each side's position in the debate, and they'll remain seated for these speeches, and they will be followed by each of the 3 topics that we will discuss today. So thank you, and strap in.
Testing. Okay, so I believe I am up first on our side. So we are affirming Americans should keep all animal products off the menu. And really, this is a discussion about the illusion that we are separate from everything. So in my practice, what I tell my patients is your diseases or what you think you have is a tree, and it's all connected by roots, right? We're all seeing that we have compartmentalized, whether you're seeing your endocrinologist or cardiologist or neurologist, and we say diabetes is here, heart disease is here, when really it's all connected. That does overlap into nature as well, where we go, oh, we're not really part of nature. Where's my bug spray? Let's kill these bugs, and let's not go outside too often. And then we see that where we start to feel we are above animals. We go, let's eat these animals. Let's not eat those animals. Let's exploit these animals, but not exploit those animals. And so we are asking the question, can we all come together to reframe how we see the world and develop a new level of consciousness that will enable our longevity as a species? Thank you.
All righty, thank you very much. So, as the negative team, we argue against the debate topic of Americans should keep all animal products off the menu. We argue that animal products are essential to the human diet, providing hard-to-replicate vitamins and nutrients. Animal fats containing amino acids and collagen are vital for brain processes and function of skin and joints. We advocate for the ethical treatment of animals. We do not support factory farming. And we recognize that consumption of properly sourced animal proteins can reconnect our species to our natural food chain and contribute to an authentic human experience. The use of holistic livestock practices can reverse desertification, restore carbon sequestration systems, enhance biodiversity, and improve valuable ecosystem functions. The consumption of animal products is dietarily essential, ethically preferable, and aids in environmental restorations.
Thank you. And now we'll begin. The first area of our discussion today will be about nutrition. So James will give the first speech on the nutrition side.
Okay, hi everybody. So this is the affirmative on the nutrition aspect. So my affirmative, and what I'm going to be touching on, is there's nothing a healthy individual in a healthy environment can get from an animal that they cannot get from a well-planned, whole food, plant-based, vegan lifestyle. When looking at this evidence, and it is peer-reviewed evidence that I'm looking at, I pride myself in looking at the funding so we can remove bias. We're avoiding conflicts of interest, and we're looking at all types of data. You have to look at epidemiology. You have to look at randomized controlled trials, in vitro and in vivo. And then on top of that, we're looking at case studies. So I have the privilege and the honor of treating patients on a day-to-day where I can take this research and then apply it in the practice and see beautiful results. Some of the journals I'll be referencing, and I'll kind of get this out of the way. And for anyone that wants my sources, and I urge you all to be critical thinkers and look this up yourself as well, I'll be happy to email that to you. You can grab my contact information. But some of these journals will include the Journal of Cell, American Journal of Preventative Medicine, American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, the Journal of Nutrients, the Journal of Nature, just to name a few. You know, the longest real-world research we have on plant-based nutrition is still being done. So there's the Adventist Health Study 2, the EPIC Oxford Study, and the Two-She Health Study. And then there has been evidence and research done on the blue zones as well. So what does this all mean? I see some yawns already happening as I talk about peer-reviewed journal and this evidence. And we could stand up here the whole day citing different journals and studies. One study says this, one study says that. And so there is this idea that confusion creates illusion. If we can flood, you know, this pro and this anti and go back and forth and argue forever, people are just going to go, forget this. I'm just going to do what I think is best. And so it is looking at this data as a whole and trying to understand and kind of sift through this bias. But when we're looking, and that's why I love epidemiology, so we're looking at real life, at populations, and I really have to hurry here, but we're looking at thousands of people with data endpoints, and what we're finding is groups with similar functionality, meaning they smoke the same, they exercise the same. The only difference is they're eating different. Some eat meat, some are vegan, some are vegetarian. We're finding all-cause mortality goes down. We're finding lower rates of diabetes, lower rates of heart disease, lower rates of these non-communicable diseases across these populations. And we're talking about very similar people with very similar lifestyles. The only change is what they're eating, and those that are eating more plant foods are getting the necessary nutrients and thriving on this lifestyle. Some of the nutrients in question, B12, vitamin D, vitamin K2, vitamin A, calcium, iron, omega-3, you know, all of these you can get from a plant-based diet. And the ones that they say are lacking, or the ones that they say you can't get from a plant-based diet, your body creates. Another aspect of your body is your gut microbiome. So in reality, about 99% of the DNA in our body is not human DNA, it's microbial DNA. And what we find is the issues people are having with a plant-based diet is really a mirror, and it's reflecting the issues you're having with your health in general. This is my average patient. They go into work at night in their car. They stay indoors all day, not getting sunlight. They're hardly in nature. They maybe eat a processed diet. Maybe they're not eating a processed diet, or they're eating lots of animal products. So they're lacking key nutrient components which disrupt their gut microbiome, which gives rise to a host of diseases. These diseases are on the spectrum. You know, they're not always straight out IBS or ulcerative colitis or diabetes. They can have issues absorbing iron. They can have issues making K2. They can have issues making B12. And this has to do with your gut microbiome. So there is a big difference as well I want to touch on between vegan and whole food plant-based. Now, the Beyond Burger and Impossible Burger and, you know, other types of ice creams and cookies are vegan, but that doesn't mean they're healthy. That doesn't mean they're optimal for health. That doesn't mean they're going to make you thrive. In many cases, you are neglecting nutrients that you could get from actual whole plant foods, and that puts you at higher risk, okay? So I'm looking at this from a strictly nutrient perspective, from a health perspective, and an optimal health perspective. So, you know, this coupled with antibiotic use, with environmental toxins, and you have the recipe for disaster in terms of your health. What we are finding is, avoiding animal products promotes an optimal gut microbiome. One of the big reasons being we are essentially inside-out plants. We think of plants and they absorb nutrients from the soil. We essentially have our soil on the inside and absorb nutrients through our gut microbiome. So our gut microbiome makes things like proteins, short-chain fatty acids, B12s, and different forms of amino acids that we then use in our body. There is a long list of anti-nutrients that many will tout from plant foods, whether it's lectins, oxalates, salicylates, phytic acids, and this is actually food for our microbes. It's actually when you have a less robust gut microbiome that you are unable to process these nutrients. These nutrients can stay in your gut lumen, and these nutrients can bind to other nutrients and cause some issues. This goes back to, again, your lifestyle and other major factors. When we're talking about animal products, one of the big aspects no one thinks about or talks about is the environmental toxin and the bioaccumulation of toxins in animals. We are talking about animals being 95% of our exposure to dioxins, which is a byproduct of industry. You think of where does your plastic come from for your television, your computer, your remote control, your earbuds, that comes from industry. There's a cost to that. And when you think of the healthiest human being if you wouldn't drink their breast milk or eat their meat, can you imagine a cow, a chicken, a pig, a duck, what have you, in the factory from where they're being born, where they're being processed, where they're being shipped, and where they're being then sent to, having a cleaner life than that human being? It is highly doubtful. So these toxins bioaccumulate in tissue and fat and breast milk, being cow's milk, and we consume that. So it's inherently risky for those environmental reasons, as well as the animal's microbiome, which once the throat is slit, once the animal is dead, that microbiome starts to degrade that body. We are eating that animal's microbiome, and that microbiome was alive. It poops, it lives, and it poops endotoxins. We then can heat that meat to kill those actual microbes, but we can't kill the endotoxins. So that creates an inflammatory response. My time is up. I can go for much longer, but I'm sure I'll talk a little bit more. Thank you so much.
Does the negative have any questions or clarifications they'd like before they respond?
I have one question. So, yeah. No, I'm thinking about how to phrase it. So how does avoiding animal product promote the gut microbiome in simpler terms?
In simpler terms, yes. So what I basically explain to my patients is the idea of risk. There's inherent risk in terms of eating, right? So when we're talking about superbugs, when we're talking about the use of antibiotics, that is essentially for our livestock. 80% of the antibiotic production in this country is used on our livestock. So when you're talking about E. coli outbreaks or salmonella outbreaks or these superbugs like MRSA in hospitals, those are directly coming from animal agriculture and livestock. So whether I'm putting a patient on a neutropenic diet for cancer or someone has IBS, it's inherent that there's risk in animal products. By eating more plant foods, you lower that risk and you optimize that treatment plan. So
just pursuant to that, if what we're talking about is eating from totally non-factory farmed meats, do you have any data on that to support that this would be harmful to the biome? Because generally speaking, like all ecology, your biome is going to respond better to more diversity in the diet, not less.
Right. Yes, and that's what we're seeing. So recent research from France, China, Japan shows that it's actually plants that are going to promote this diversity. When you're looking at the mucosal layer of your gut lining, the mucosal layer is made up of poly and oligosaccharides. So it is actually made up of carbohydrates. And what we're finding is even those placed on a high fat or a mostly animal product diet, whether it's organic farm-raised eggs or free-range eggs or grass-fed beef, they're lacking two essential nutrients. whatever these animals, however they're raised, they're lacking fiber and phytonutrients. Those are two key nutrients that promote this mucosal layer, that promote short-chain fatty acid production, and that promote a healthy gut microbiome. So even taking out the factory farmed aspect, you're still lacking these two huge nutrients.
Thank you. Harmonie Hernandez will now deliver the first.
Red meat continues to play an important role in the human diet by providing a good source of quality protein, as well as beneficial fatty acids and a variety of micronutrients for optimal health. With veganism trending, many people are removing all traces of meat from their diets. These people may be experiencing vitamin deficiencies, suffering decreased brain volumes, fatigue, and confusion. One of the greatest myths is that meat doesn't belong in a healthy diet. Meat consumption is often blamed for high cholesterol, high blood pressure, heart disease, and obesity. But the culprit behind these health issues is sugar and the overconsumption of carbohydrates that break down into sugar in the body. With the heavily grain and sugar-based diet, we are suffering increased rates of obesity, cancer, diabetes, and osteoporosis. We also experience alarming incidences of skin problems, heart disease, and inflammations. Extensive studies on saturated fats in recent years have shown that saturated fats are not dangerous. Saturated fats have no big impact on cholesterol or cardiovascular diseases. Our genes developed before the agricultural revolution, when we were meat eaters. And on top of that, the human genome has changed less than 0.02% in the last 40,000 years. Our bodies were, and still are, genetically programmed for optimal functioning on a diet including meat, and that programming has not changed. Now, while there were many arguments circulating about why we shouldn't eat meat, here are a few about why we should. The first one is that we were created that way. By nature, humans are meat eaters, and our bodies are designed for it. We have incisors for tearing down meat and molars for grinding it. If you compare the human digestive system to the digestive system to that of herbivores, you will actually find that herbivores have a long digestive system with specialized organs to digest cellulose, but the human digestive systems are short and do not have the same specialized organs to digest, to break down plants and harvest the nutrients like we do with meat. If we were meant to subsist on vegetables alone, our digestive systems would be similar to that of a cow with 4 stomachs, to break down cellulose in order to break down the plant material. One of the problems with switching to an animal-free diet is that the small intestine is unable to properly digest gluten, and wheat is actually being blamed for the onset of other health conditions like obesity, heart disease, and celiac disease. Not only are our bodies unable to digest whole grains, but whole grains are bad for us because they contain phytates, which bind to materials such as zinc and iron. Therefore, they steal nutrients from our bodies instead of helping them. Now, the second argument is stable blood sugar. Meat helps keep blood sugar levels stable. Steady blood sugar is critical in preventing type 2 diabetes, and it helps keep energy levels steady and creates a feeling of satisfaction between meals. So, with a stable blood sugar, you're less likely to crave fattening snacks. Now, moving on to the third one, being muscle growth. The best source of meat is protein. The best source of protein is meat. Meat also contains vitamins and minerals that aid in muscle growth like zinc and iron. Meat also contains creatine that encourages muscle growth and improves protein synthesis and provides muscles with energy. If meat's crucial role in muscle growth isn't enough, meat also helps burn fat. Meat has a high thermogenic effect because of its protein content, so that 30% of its calories are being burned off during digestion alone. Now, vegetables mainly have non-heme iron, one of the nutrients that is not easily absorbable to the human body. Recent studies have also shown that even spinach does not provide the quality of iron needed by the body. There's no natural substitute for the high-quality protein and some of the rare nutrients and vitamins found in animal meat. The mineral zinc in the meat boosts the muscle growth, and iron boosts the energy levels that combats fatigue. Upwards of 90% of vegans and vegetarians are deficient in zinc and iron. And yes, there are nutrient pills, but they do not produce the same quality of zinc and iron as opposed to simply eating meat. Now, the fourth is neurotransmitters and mental health. People who don't eat meat are especially vulnerable to neurotransmitter imbalances because of the absence of meat protein, which provides all of the essential amino acids human bodies need. Neurotransmitters are chemical messengers that regulate many of our functions, including physical, cognitive, weight, and emotional states. Meat provides all of the essential amino acids human bodies need. People who don't eat meat are especially vulnerable to neurotransmitter imbalances, which can result in problems like depression, anxiety, and hyperactivity. According to research, vegetarians are 2 to 3 more times likely to suffer from depression, anxiety, and eating disorders. Women who reduce lamb and beef in their diets are more likely to suffer depression, according to a new study. When those who conducted the study looked at women consuming less than the recommended amount of red meat in their study, they found that those women were twice as likely to have a diagnosed depressive or anxiety disorder, even when they took into account the socioeconomic status, physical activity level, smoking, weight, and age. The relationship between low red meat intake and mental health remained. Now, the fifth argument is long-lasting energy. Scientists at the University of Cambridge discovered that amino acids stimulate orexin cells more than any other nutrients do. Thus, consuming meat leads to burning more calories and more energy. The creatine nutrient that I previously mentioned does not only promote muscle growth, but it also efficiently manages the energy reserves in the brain. After long hours of work or mental activity, creatine maintains the optimum level mental and physical performance with a constant supply of energy. And as I previously stated, meat is one of the best sources of iron. Iron deficits put you at a risk of anemia and low energy, which is why anemia is a chronic problem for vegetarians. Now, the last argument that I'll be making is essential nutrients. There are many nutrients in the meat that are critical to overall health. While there are many sources of protein, meat is a source of complete protein containing all of the amino acids our bodies need. All B vitamins are found in greater concentration in meats than in plant sources, and vitamin B12 can only be found in animal sources. The B vitamins are critical to health, especially mental health. Deficits in these vitamins can cause insomnia, weakness, and dementia. It is only in animal proteins that all the types of amino acids are required by the body is found. And yes, I will admit that plants have similar proteins to that of meat, but they do not possess the necessary proteins that make those nutrients readily absorbable by our body. One of the things that we get from meat that we can't get from plants is collagen. After the age of 35 or so, the body stops producing collagen because of the previous diet of humans. Collagen was always present, therefore the body stops producing it. And I think I'm out of time.
And so I can ask questions then, right? Yes. So did you come across any like epidemiology studies showing that you mentioned vegans have, or people on a plant-based diet have bad outcomes, or you mentioned deficiencies? Was that in, do you know what kind of study that was?
So the study that mentioned that vegans have bad outcomes were mainly related to mental health. It was a study done on Australian women. But I mean, we're all humans. It's all going to be the same thing. It's just a different geographical location. But
right.
Yeah.
And the point being made is that, you know, you'll be hard pressed to find real world studies. So that's what makes epidemiology special, is that you're looking at real world aspects with real world people doing real world things, right? So in that, you're not going to find mortality outcomes where people eating more meat and animal products have better outcomes in terms of their risk of death, right? In terms of their risk of disease. You're going to find some of these talking points in design studies, whether it's clinical control studies where they can manipulate some statistics. For example, there was a study done on cholesterol, because you did mention that saturated fat does not play a role in increasing cholesterol or the cholesterol consumed. So the study was designed in a way that they were already eating a high cholesterol diet. And for anyone understanding physiology, you have a plateau for cholesterol. Now, if you're already eating a high cholesterol diet and they add more eggs to it, you're not going to increase your cholesterol. Therefore, the study concluded eating eggs does not increase your overall serum cholesterol. Now, that's inherently poor study design, but this is many times what is happening across the board is poor study design giving outcomes, news media and news articles run with these outcomes and make headlines on it. That's where you'll hear butter is back, cheese and eggs, et cetera, et cetera. There's so much to debate on here, but you have to look at study design. You have to take study design into account and add this into a cumulative perspective. Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah, that study design thing applies to both sides, and all the studies you're talking about are on factory meat, not the meat that we're talking about.
Well, and that is because a majority of Americans consume factory meat.
Yeah, we're not defending that. The question is all meat should be off the menu.
Right.
We're saying that regeneratively produced meat, holistically produced meat is perfectly fine.
Yeah, but most meat is 99% from factory farms at this point.
Right, that's not what we're defending, so that's a straw man. Thanks.
Okay, we're going to move on to the next one.
Yeah.
Please keep in mind, panelists, that the question and answer period is for questions, directed questions, and you'll have a chance to give a rebuttal.
Sure. Very good.
Oh, wait, it's my rebuttal?
Using that, but that's what we're arguing for, to get rid of it. Why is she back out? She's doing a rebuttal, and then he gets to do it.
As we previously stated, we do not support factory farms. We are looking for a more sustainable and ethical way to keep meat on the table. That being said, our studies were done by Deakin University, and they were done on real-life people. They were things that were taken into account were the socioeconomic statuses, how healthy these people were, their physical activity levels. Let me see. They were groups with similar functionalities, just as the affirmative side previously mentioned. The only difference was their diets, and we could clearly see that there was a difference in their mental health. One of the other studies that was done was amongst anorexia nervosa patients and vegetarianism. That study was done, and what it found was that vegetarianism is primarily popular amongst young patients with eating disorders. It's used kind of as a coping mechanism, and 65% of these anorexia nervosa patients that were included in the studies in Western countries specifically admitted to being vegetarians. We prove the point that there are certain nutrients that are essential to our bodies that can't be just supplemented, such as vitamin B12. You know, those can only be found in animal sources. Zinc and iron come from animal sources. When we incorporate wheat into our diets and we cut out less meat, that zinc and iron gets absorbed by the wheat. It doesn't necessarily go to our body. We can't really supplement our diets with anything. Again, I just want to clarify, we are advocating for a more ethical and more sustainable way to keep meat on American plates. Thank you.
And yes, and I'll agree, you know, choosing, if everyone could hunt, right? So if everyone was, like Joe Rogan promotes, go hunt elk. So if everyone here, everyone in the United States could learn how to bow hunt, get a bow, go on an elk hunting trip and only eat that meat, I think that would be great. That would be a step in the right direction. That would drastically cut down the amount of meat consumption everyone would be eating. The data on that, though, and to show those differences is lacking. And this is where, again, I go back to epidemiology, because in the Adventist health study, for example, you're talking about a higher socioeconomic group of people. You are talking about a group of people that are eating meat, that are eating higher quality meat. And again, we're talking about outcomes data here. When we're looking at the outcomes data, the outcome data doesn't match what the negative side is saying, that it's actually saying the opposite. There is a difference. Even when we're talking about and we're factoring in the variables of exercise and smoking and drinking and other factors, we're seeing that mortality risk, which is risk of death, increases for those consuming animal products. We're seeing an increased risk of diabetes, and some of the points being made of B12 coming from animal products. It doesn't come from animals. It comes from microbes. So it's actually ruminant animals that use their microbes to digest the grasses that, yes, humans can't digest grass, but we can digest other plant foods. And it's actually the microbes that produce B12. So humans can also get B12 from soil microbes. How many of you go out in your permaculture organic garden every day? Right. And then if I asked your ancestors this 10,000 years ago, it'd be a lot different, right? So we are not in the soil, we're not being exposed to these microbes. I want to get to some other points as well in terms of sugar being the main culprit. And actually before then, other nutrients mentioned was zinc and iron. Zinc and iron are prevalent in a plant-based diet. If you're, another one we hear is vitamin A. You hear it with, you also, well, again, to touch on B12, though, there are also foods like natto. You can do tempeh. You can do nori, which about a teaspoon of nori, which is a sea vegetable, will give you your RDA of B12. That is coming from a food. Supplements are exactly the word. They are supplements, not replacements. Supplements are just an insurance policy that even many omnivores should be consuming as well, just as an insurance policy. I want to touch on the correlation of saying, well, because these anorexia nervosa patients seem to be, there's a higher rate of vegetarianism, that doesn't mean vegetarianism, that it automatically correlates to all vegetarians or vegans. That's just one study where there was a correlation. One more minute, okay. What else do I want to say? In terms of, again, sugar and diabetes, it is actually intracellular lipids that create insulin resistance. So when you're talking about diabetes, you're talking about your body unable to recognize insulin. That is not sugar. So an easy way I put this really quickly in the time I have is imagine the DMV. The sugar is the line of people outside the door. The fat is the person arguing with the DMV worker on the inside. A keto diet or a low-carb diet removes the people from the line, but if you open the door, you're still going to see the argument going on. That is actually intracellular fat that disrupts signaling of your insulin. This is where people who go on a ketogenic diet or a low-carb diet or whatever the case is, low-carb, they still have insulin resistance. Their cellular health is not okay just because they've removed sugar. So that's all the time I have. Thank you. So much to talk about.
She's saying things that aren't even true.
Now we're going to shift to the second topic of tonight's discussion, which is the ethics of having animal products on your dinner plate. This time we will switch the order so that the negative will present first. So Brianna will introduce us to the topic.
Alrighty, thank you. So, at a young age, like many of you, I had a passion for Disney. So I discovered a philosophy that gave purpose to my existence on this planet, and I owe it all to Disney's Mufasa. It's the circle of life. Energy flows from one being to the next. When I am asked, should Americans keep all animal products off the menu, I can confidently say no. Animal products belong on the menu, but emphasis must be placed on quality of life for those animals. Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines ethics as a set of moral principles of conduct governing an individual or a group. I stand here before you arguing the ethical perspective of my encouragement of eating meat and other animal products. Although my initial understanding of life and death influenced my comfort in eating another animal, it has been my rigorous studies and energy expended that shaped my personal code of conduct. Originally, I was a vegetarian, advocating for better treatment of animals. But my perspectives shifted. I began to look at animal products more than just something I wanted to eat, but something I needed to eat. I valued my role in the ecosystem. And deep down, I knew I was an active participant. What follows is a summary of my transition from a doubting herbivore to a confident carnivore. Tovar Sorelli from The Mindful Carnivore shares insight from an ecological perspective. The mere fact of living, I had begun to realize, linked me to larger webs of life and death. The sandy soil in our garden beds needed all the organic matter it could get. So we imported compost by the truckload, compost made from the manure of chickens, horses, and cows. We weren't eating animals, but our vegetables were. This highlights the unescapable fact that energy is cycled and that death is essential to life. Does that mean 5 minutes left? Thank you. Even if we try to remove animals from our food system, our general disconnect from the system makes it difficult to succeed. Robert Kimber, writer of Living Wild and Domestic, helps us consider what skeletons might be hiding in the closet of a cup of granola. How many nesting trees were felled? How many bison died to make way for oat, wheat, and cornfields in the plains of Kansas and Nebraska? Imagine the number of squirrels, rabbits, raccoons, and deer pulverized by the tractors and trucks harvesting the crops. Consider how many square miles of Alaskan wildlife habitat have been and will be destroyed to drill the oil wells that will keep our trucks and tractors rolling. Even as one tries to keep hands clean of unnecessary suffering, loss of life is still occurring. The globalized world we live in enables our species to turn a blind eye to negative impacts on other species. The final stage in the common 7 stages of grief is acceptance. Acceptance that death is out of one's control, and that one can only move forward with a sense of purpose. When I consume meat, I pay homage over the energy expended. It is my purpose to participate in energy cycles, to receive energy, and to give that energy back someday. With all balanced systems, it is easy to destabilize. Aldo Leopold, in his essay, Thinking Like a Mountain, teaches us about the fear the mountain has for deer. He gracefully accounts the consequences of predator eradication on ecosystem functionality. I have watched the face of many a newly wolfless mountain and seen the south-facing slopes wrinkle with a maze of new deer trails. I have seen every edible bush and seedling browsed, first to anemic destitute and then to death. I have seen every edible tree defoliated to the height of a saddle horn. In the end, the starved bones of the hoped-for deer herd, dead of its own too much. Human conquest of development did more than push wildlife to the fringes. It disrupted the balance of predator and prey within the ecosystems themselves. With populations of predators decimated for various reasons, deer populations exceed the limits of the plant life supporting them. Human expansion has restricted the return of large predators to many of our wild spaces. The ecosystems need predation, pressure to function their best. This is when I found peace and understood my role in my food system. I was going to be a predator and eat meat, ensuring an ethical and authentic experience, and as a byproduct, I would support conservation and the well-being of the land around me. Wild meat is organic. The animals have not been eating plants treated with pesticides. It is free range, never spending a single day locked in by 4 walls. I can guarantee that this form of protein is sourced local and has an extremely low carbon footprint because I harvest close to home. My animals have quick deaths. The blood on my hands represents respect and responsibility for taking of life. I approach my fallen brethren with calm sadness. Taking a life is not easy for me. I crouch low and thank the animal for their sacrifice. Their loss of life will fuel my body and my soul. As a woman, there is nothing more empowering than knowing I can independently provide for my family. Hunting is an experience unlike anything else. Looking up at the blue sky, breathing in the chilly morning air, I appreciate the opportunity to be one with the system around me. I consider the intimate relationship I have developed with this creature. I am grateful to walk in its footprints and bask in the peace of its world. I encourage you to recognize your role in our greater ecosystem. Not everyone can be a hunter, but everyone can support positive change. Support a healthy, holistic meat production model. Or better yet, support conservation efforts by engaging in the natural food webs around you. Thank you.
Hi. I'm very happy to be here today speaking on behalf of the animals, debating the ethics of animal exploitation. Alongside my fiancée, Anna, I am a vegan activist, and one thing that I've learned is that many people don't understand what veganism is. They think it's a diet, or it's a political statement, or it's something that you try, or it's something that you do once a week, but it's none of those things. Veganism is an ethical lifestyle that seeks to exclude animal exploitation as far as what's possible and practical. It is the belief that animal use for food, for clothing, for entertainment, for laboratory testing, and any other purpose is wrong. And we want it to stop. But why do we want it to stop? What ethical arguments can we make? Well, first we must acknowledge that eating animals and animal products is unnecessary. The breast milk of a cow, or as it's been dubbed by us, dairy, it is exactly that. It is the breast milk of a pregnant cow. It is food specifically designed by evolution to feed a cow's baby. So in what way physiologically does it make sense for humans to require cow breast milk? Or the ovulation of a chicken, eggs? What possible evolutionary adaptations have Homo sapiens made to require eating a chicken's period? And animal flesh, which is made up of water, protein, iron, B vitamins, these are all things that we can find in non-animal sources. Humans need calories, and we need macro and micronutrients, but we do not need animal flesh specifically. So it is not an unreasonable statement to say that animal products are unnecessary for human health, which means we choose to eat them. And it also means we choose to enslave, exploit, mutilate, rape, and murder animals for temporary taste pleasure. Now, we often say animals as opposed to humans, failing to realize that, of course, humans are animals. And since we believe that humans deserve certain fundamental rights, such as the right to be alive, surely animals deserve certain rights as well, as animal rights are a natural extension of human rights. But why do humans deserve these rights in the first place? What makes us so special? It is because human beings are sentient. We have a subjective experience of life. We value our lives and we want to keep living them. We experience love, we experience pain and joy and sadness and curiosity and fear and happiness and sorrow. Every single one of us perceives the world in our own unique way. But the thing is, non-human animals, they're sentient too. The Cambridge Declaration on Consciousness was drafted in 2012 by a prominent international group of cognitive neuroscientists, neuropharmacologists, neurophysiologists, neuroanatomists, and computational neuroscientists who gathered at the University of Cambridge to reassess the neurobiological substrates of conscious experience. And they concluded that, quote, "The weight of evidence indicates that humans are not unique in possessing the neurological substrates that generate consciousness. Non-human animals, including all mammals and all birds, which are the animals that we eat, and many other creatures, including octopuses, they also possess these neurological substrates." And that should come as no shock to anyone who's ever lived with a non-human animal or spent any time with them at length. Non-human animals, they have personalities, they have preferences, they play, they communicate with us. They too have a subjective experience of life and they don't want to die. So since we value sentience in the human context, in order to be morally consistent, we must also value it in the non-human context. And so if it is morally wrong to needlessly take the life of a human animal, it is morally wrong to needlessly take the life of a non-human animal. And for those of you unfamiliar with the term, what veganism seeks to combat is something called speciesism. It's the discrimination of certain animals based purely on their species. There is no consistent metric by which we employ speciesism. We are the oppressors, and we simply pick and choose which animals we love and which animals we murder. We love dogs like family members, but we murder pigs. We rape cows to keep them constantly pregnant and producing breast milk, but we don't do that to giraffes. And we kill baby male chickens on their first day of life because they don't lay eggs, but we don't do that to bald eagles. So why? We tend to look at this through our eyes, not theirs, but when we're dealing with issues of justice, we must always examine the situation through the eyes of the victim. And the food choices we make have consequences. They are largely unseen consequences because that's how the animal ag industry wants it. They don't want you to think about the fact that a baby chicken was murdered so you could eat his sister's eggs. And they don't want you to think about the fact that a cow was repeatedly raped and had her children stolen from her just so you can drink her baby's milk. And they certainly don't want you to think about the fact that a living being with the cognition of a 3-year-old human was gassed to death just so you can eat 2 strips of bacon. Children are separated from mothers, babies are mutilated and marked for death, living beings are enslaved and murdered simply because they look different than us. This is needless suffering and death that we are causing for mere taste pleasure, and I, along so many others, want this to end. And lastly, I will say that we currently grow enough food to feed 10 billion people because we feed the majority of our crops to the animals that we plan on murdering. So 70 billion land animals get full bellies every day, but almost 1 billion human beings are starving. This is an ethical issue for humans too. Now, each and every day you can choose which side of history you want to be on, the side of oppression and violence, or the side of justice and peace. It's simply a matter of just reaching for the almond milk instead of the breast milk, or baking a vegan cake instead of a cake with chicken periods in it, or ordering the Beyond Burger right here instead of ordering the mashed up cow flesh. But just because we have these options available to us, let's not convince ourselves that eating animals is a choice, because it is never a personal choice when there is a victim involved. Now, I know in a world of 8 billion people, it's impossible sometimes to feel like we matter as individuals. But every single one of us does. So every time you decide to put a vegan meal on your plate, you are making a difference for yourself, for the planet, and for the animals. So will you choose life over taste? Because we are the only ones with the power to stop this horrific cruelty, which means we have the responsibility to do so. Thank you.
Alrighty, I believe this is my opportunity for clarification. So, with that, do you agree that each life saved is valuable?
Each life saved is valuable? Yes.
Great. Are you arguing that all Americans at all times should keep meat off the menu?
Yes.
Great. That's all that I have for clarification. So, what's next?
So now you get to respond to the other side.
Good.
Thank you.
So one of the first things I heard was the circle of life from The Lion King. And the circle of life is what we call an appeal to nature. It is a logical fallacy that says that just because something happens in nature, that thing is moral. Again, I'm talking about veganism, which is a moral issue. It's an ethical lifestyle. So just because animals do something in nature, that doesn't mean that it's ethical, doesn't mean that it's moral, it doesn't mean that we should do those same things. We don't do everything that wild animals do. We pick and choose that justification for when it suits us. Now, I know this side is arguing against factory farmed meat, but I think that it's unreasonable to expect everyone who wants to eat meat to hunt. First of all, most every single meat eater doesn't want to hunt. They don't want to kill animals. Most people are compassionate, loving individuals, so naturally, they don't want to shoot a defenseless animal with a gun. Second of all, there simply aren't enough animals to hunt to make that a viable source of calories for us. To my knowledge, there's approximately 30 million deer in the United States and about 1 million elk. There's 327 million human beings who all need fed, so the numbers just don't add up. This is why we started factory farming meat in the first place, by the way. It's also a very privileged position, I would say, to take to, to assume that hunting or grass-fed or local should be everyone's norm. Of course, hunting requires you to be able to afford a gun and afford a hunting license and live in an area where there are animals to hunt, and then the ability to skin the animal and process the animal corpse once the animal has been killed, not to mention the time spent doing all these things. This is why people prefer to simply buy their food at the grocery store. We need farmers. We don't all want to become farmers. We don't all want to become hunters. I think most importantly, we need to address the victim, as I said. And I highly doubt that an animal being hunted cares whether or not his murderer is male or female. And regardless of the gender of the oppressor, killing a defenseless animal with a gun is not an empowering act, it is a cruel one. And so empowering oneself to provide food that for one's family that does not require the murder of an animal, I think that is empowering. And so even though the person taking the life of the animal, they perceive this death to be better than factory farming or better than other sorts of death, like death in nature, taking the life of someone who does not want to die is just that. It is taking the life of someone who does not want to die. And as I said, it's completely unnecessary. Eating animal products is needless. So again, choosing to kill an animal, regardless of where the animal comes from, is choosing to murder. And furthermore, an argument for hunting or an argument for local meat or grass-fed meat is not an argument against veganism so much as it's an argument for hunting. It doesn't address the immoral act of taking life in and of itself. And I know she brought up crop deaths in these giant fields of grasses and wheat that we grow in Kansas. Well, the vast majority of those crops are grown to feed animals that we plan on murdering. It's a very small percentage that actually goes to feeding human beings. And if we can accept that we owe these animals some modicum of respect, we want their death to be quick, we want their lives to be happy, but we're still okay taking them in the end. Why is that? Why does a person's quality of life justify ultimately taking that person's life? And lastly, I'll say, there was this talk about it not being easy, that we need to pay homage to the animal, give respect to the animal. It's not easy to take the life of the animal. Then why are we doing it? We don't need to be doing this. So let's not.
Here, here.
Alrighty, as I clarified earlier, Brian agreed that all life is valuable. So let's talk about life and that it's valuable. The life that was lost in those fields. Davis in the Journal of Agricultural and Environmental Ethics estimates that 15 animals per hectare die each year during the productions of crops. The USDA in 2007 estimated that there was 165 million hectares in the United States. If we do some simple math, that means 2.5 billion animal lives are lost each year in the fields of our existing crop production. If we are arguing the sheer unnecessary loss of life, a vegan lifestyle is not innocent. On the contrary, it swaps lives for fewer large animals to more small animals. As a hunter, every life I take is acknowledged, is used, and is appreciated. We also recognized that all humans at all times should not eat meat. So let's talk about meat and eating it. Malnutrition is human suffering. UNICEF defines malnutrition in the Children, Food and Nutrition 2019 report as a lack of proper nutrition caused by not eating or having enough to eat, not eating, the right things, or being unable to use the food that one does eat. 59% of children worldwide are not being fed much needed nutrients from animal products. The debate statement of keeping all animal products off the menu in America puts certain social, economic classes at a disadvantage due to the alternative of eating meat being extremely costly. Supplements are expensive. Ensuring you have the right nutrition, the right vegetables, the right zinc, the right iron, that takes time and that takes energy. My statement sounds a little similar to his. Both choices take time. Both choices take energy. Both choices require learning. This debate topic is not black and white. It does not have to be one or the other, but it does have to be conscious and made with choices that are aware of our influence and impacts on the land. One stage in all of mammals' lives are going to be an obligate carnivore. That means this animal at this point in their life has to eat animal products. A defining characteristic of mammary glands, of mammals, are mammary glands. This highlights that we are one and the same with our animals, with our animal brethren. Why is it that when children cry for milk, that's acceptable? Yeah, but my cravings, my internal diet, my need, when I need animal products, it's immoral and wrong. Milk is extremely valuable. It's consumed across the board from species to species. Removing me from the food web is unfair to my natural inclinations and denies me an authentic life. It's abnormal for us to still consume meat. It's also abnormal for us to build superhighways. Our genomes have shifted over thousands of years, building our brains and our digestive capabilities, allowing continued use of such a valuable resource. You could say we have hit the evolutionary jackpot. I am grateful for this opportunity. I am grateful that I can consume and be cognizant of it. As with all animal products, I select sources ensuring quality of life for my counterparts. John Madison describes it well. I do not hunt for the joy of killing, but for the joy of living, and the unexpressible pleasure of mingling my life, however briefly, with that of a wild creature that I respect, admire, and value. Thank you.
Impact that animal products on our dinner plates have on the environment, and Molly Bashford will start us off on the
Thank you. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I think it's still afternoon. The most lethal weapons of mass destruction have become our fork, spoon, and knife as we eat our way to extinction. The Earth has experienced 5 mass extinctions before the one we are living through now. We are in our 6th extinction. We are 50% in. That's halfway there. Each extinction on the planet was all caused from too much greenhouse gas in the atmosphere. We have more greenhouse gases now in our atmosphere than we in all of those 5 extinctions prior. We are at the tipping point. And when will we stop destroying ourselves? The IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, says we have 10 to 11 years. Now, how can they really say that, right? I mean, that's just a, what they can sort of see, but it's like, we don't really know how Mother Nature is going to react to all this carbon that we're putting into her atmosphere as we dump more and more into it every day, and methane into the atmosphere. It's a ceiling. It gets caught up there, and that we're dumping 110 million tons of man-made global warming pollution into the atmosphere every 24 hours, and more millions tons of methane from animal agriculture. What really astounds me is that we know what we know and we continue to do what we do. If we know better, why aren't we doing better? We just keep eating meat and dairy as if there will be no price to pay. Gluttony is one of the 7 deadly sins, and we have become gluttonous. And it seems we can't stop stuffing our faces with animal flesh, and as we get fat, the earth dies. A high cost to pay for addiction to meat, but unless the addicted stops all consumption of the substance they are addicted to, a slow demise is inevitable. When will the rivers stop running? All the diversity dies, the forests are clear, no more fish in the sea, just plastic bottles, and plastic is made from fossil fuel. The atmosphere overflowing with carbon and methane, temperatures rise so hot that we can't go outside. In some regions of the planet, that is already happening. The Arctic ice is melting, sea level rise, displacing millions of humans, and they have nowhere to go. They are called climate refugees, and this is also already happening. Food production is thwarted, water scarce, storms rage, fires burn. How many fires have erupted here in our own backyard? 6,402, actually. And species are dying and going extinct. 1 million animal and plant species are now threatened with extinction, many within decades, more than ever before in human history. Nature is declining globally at mass rates. And the rate of species extinction is accelerating with grave impacts on people around the world. Ecosystems, species, wild populations, local varieties, and breeds of domesticated plants and animals are shrinking, deteriorating, and vanishing. The essential interconnectedness of life on Earth is getting smaller and increasingly frayed. And remember, we are a species. We are in line with that, with others destined to disappear unless we stop the madness of big ag and move to a plant-based diet. Animal agriculture causes more greenhouse gas emissions than the entire transportation sector combined. That is new from the livestock, a major threat to environmental, food, and agriculture organizations from the United Nations. And it's not just the methane that is being released that is causing all this. It's the runoff. It's creating havoc with our environment. It's the runoff of the animal's waste that is polluting the water, and then there is the deforestation of the land that we have to allow all this cattle to live. So there are 3 major offenses that is being created by big ag. Factory farming is one of the most destructive industries on the planet. 9 billion animals are killed for meat every year. These animals are housed, as they've said, in factory farms where they eat corn and soy, they burp and pass gas, thusly creating methane. And it goes into the atmosphere. They have large amounts of waste, feces and urine that is collected in large cesspools and these cesspools are large, 4 football fields long. They can be as big as a small city. And manure runoff from factory farms is a leading cause of water pollution in the United States, having polluted 35,000 miles of rivers in 22 states. There is a chant that we say when we march for the animals: polluting the air, polluting the water, profiting off animal slaughter. This liquid waste ends up in the ocean where it creates dead zones where nothing can live. There are several dead zones all over the oceans around us. The Amazon is burning because for our love of meat. Sorry. And the IPCC also says, once again, it keeps going back because they used to think it was only fossil fuel that was destroying the planet. But what they're seeing now, it's the methane from the big agriculture. That is there's three, it's one that creates the most destruction to the planet. Climate scientists from around the world have all declared a climate crisis requiring a significant reduction of greenhouse gas emissions from the burning of fossil fuels, and now they are recognizing that animal agriculture is the worst culprit of the destruction of the planet. Livestock's long shadow is an assessment of recent research, taking into account direct impacts of livestock production along with the impacts of feed, crop cultivation. The report states that the livestock sector is one of the top 2-3 most significant contributors to serious environmental problems. So I'm asking that if we want to save the planet, that we must keep animal products off the plate, and I believe anywhere else in our lifestyles. Thank you.
So is it your contention if we remove all of these hundreds of thousands of animals from the landscape, there will be no more pollution of the waterways?
Well, there will be pollution from other sources, but not from the factory farms. But what we need to do is we need to completely go green, and that's in the Green New Deal, going to solar, going to wind, but so taking that off, yes, a lot of it will stop polluting the water.
Okay, and solar and wind will prevent erosion and grow grasslands and so on?
I don't understand the question. So solar and wind will not destroy the soil?
Right, will heal the soil, will prevent any erosion from agricultural practices.
First of all, we have to completely heal the planet. The planet is really sick. We've put so much toxic waste, not just manure, but everything that we've done to kill the planet, which is, like I've said, we're 50% into an extinction phase. But yes, we can. I think it is possible, and it's going to clean energy completely and no animal products.
I think you're talking about carbon sequestration and using permaculture and animal models to sequester carbon in the atmosphere into the soil. That can also be done in veganic farming if one wanted to. So I mean, that can still happen as well.
Right. No, I was just asking about the pollution of the waterways in particular.
No, he wasn't.
Okay. Keeping animal products off the menu is ecologically illiterate. Following this advice would only accelerate mass degradation of the very landscape, soils, and ecosystems that constitute the very foundation of every civilization, every idea, every value, and life itself. So the answer to this debate proposal for anybody with even the most minimal concern for actual ecological integrity must be a hard no. Integrity means not merely environmental health, but one which includes us, the integrity of our living connection with our environment, the specific and deep ecological role of the species, the very basis of all human dignity. Integrity, the single most important fact about our current annual plant-based agricultural system is that its dominant product by far is not food, but degradation by soil loss. 100 tons of topsoil are destroyed each half ton of plant foods produced, basically what it takes to feed one vegan for 1 year. Globally, that's 83 billion tons a year. This is not a viable food system at all. Humanity's alternative is regenerative agriculture, creating and managing farms as ecosystems, working with nature, not against it. And it's already robustly happening across 5 continents on at least 40 million acres worldwide, and it's growing rapidly. Just like ecosystems, agroecosystems are perennial-based rather than annual. And critically, they create new soils. Here, as in nature, animals are the most crucial link and the driving factor for creating soils. It was, after all, animals who built the world's most fertile soils that we're farming today. In fact, if your goal is a sustainable and a regenerative agroecosystem, removing animals from the menu is the single worst thing you could possibly do. As a wise man once pointed out, there are no vegetarian ecologies. The strange urge to eliminate these animals severely lacks ecological insight. Some call it a kind of sickness born of alienation, modern disconnection, and ecological estrangement. To prevent the death of a pig, some would murder whole ecosystems and ensure extinction for whole races of domesticated beings. It's only a narrow perspective, a demented nihilism that sees humans as fundamentally a net negative, a cancer upon the innocent earth, instead of recognizing in our species one of the only potential earth symbionts with a proven capacity to actually increase levels of productivity and biodiversity for all life much higher than what a natural ecosystem can do in our absence, by managing our agriculture regeneratively and in partnership with nature. We've documented examples of such animal-partnered silvopastures functioning consciously managed by humans for over 6,000 years. Show me a more sustainable agriculture. These systems have the resilience of natural ecosystems while offering the best buffering and stability potential to any future climate changes, as studies also show. They simultaneously offer the best hope to address the climate issue by sequestering more carbon in soils than either forest or pasture are able to do alone. Beyond eliminating our best soil building capacities, any proposal to remove our farm animal friends is also a hyper-radical rejection of our proper human role within the food web. Energy and information are shared in food webs essentially from stomach to stomach, metabolism to metabolism, species to species. It's an organismic cataclysm, a great majestic chain of predation. This organizes the structure into different trophic levels that are seen in every healthy ecology. Here, each organism's principal role is exactly this transformational exchange of biotic materials that we call eating. Our human role from millions of years of these co-evolved relationships is to feed across all levels of the trophic pyramid, not just the very bottom. The role is critical, not only for ourselves, but for all other organisms who also play their evolved roles within that same food web. Each counts on the other to do its part. The word, by the way, for this specific multi-level ecological role is omnivore. The health of the omnivore and their environment depends upon sustaining this behavior and its network of feeding relationships. A hawk feeds at all 5 different trophic levels. Any lowering of his trophic status is taken by ecologists to indicate a worse condition and greater stress on that organism. The debate proposal, written in the extremist idiom of the evangelical fundamentalist, commands that all of us break this food web integrity by drastically lowering our trophic level to the lowest. In essence, they want us to become ecological bottom feeders, destabilizing our ecology by abandoning our most fundamental relationships in the world. So we say no to this proposal, not least of all because our fullest human dignity only begins when we positively affirm our evolved, meat-centric, omnivorous role and responsibility within our ecology, and not reject or deny it. The single unfortunate exception to this, by the way, in any branch of our lineage was an actual solely plant-based hominin, Homo paranthropus, the first to attempt the ill-considered experiment of a dubious return to relying on plants alone. This ended naturally in his rapid extinction. Don't be like Paranthropus. Accepting and embracing our carnivory-tilted omnivory acknowledges the reality of our place in a greater system of perpetual world renewal, where death comes one day to everything and is no less essential than life. Don't waste energy hating the situation. Don't carelessly discard that which made us possible in the first place, which is a nihilistic self-negation. It's a self-erasure at the deepest levels. Don't ungratefully reject the very activity and behavior that made it possible to think or say anything at all. Rather, embrace and affirm life, eat animals, live every world-renewing death by way of joyous, grateful participation, confirming our sacred mutual interdependence with animals and with the world. Appreciate ecology as our past and our only possible destiny. Thank you.
What happens now? Oh, do I have some questions? Yes. I was just curious on, so you're saying, yes, animals, I agree, they do help with the soil, but that doesn't mean we have to kill them. And then I just wanted to get clear on your, the sequestering carbon in the soil. Now, would this happen on the farms?
Yes.
And how many farms would there be? Do you know, or just?
As many as there are now.
And so don't you think, though, as a species, as we evolve, that, and we become more conscious, and instead of going back, don't you think we also evolve in what we eat and how we treat the planet and how we treat animals?
Well, in terms of going back to plants is going back 6 million years in our lineage. So that's the backwards direction.
Yeah, but I mean, it's like, yeah, several years ago, we never used plastic either. So if we stop using plastic, is that going back? Sometimes the things that we started out doing were some of the better things, but that's not necessarily, evolution is shifting the consciousness of your mind. It's not necessarily, you might go forward and then discover, oh yeah, that's wrong, like that's not right. It's like plastic isn't good either, and we didn't use plastic 50 years ago.
But that's just not what we discovered.
Okay.
Now you'll have a chance to respond.
Right. All right. Moment. So anyone who's seen the vegan propaganda documentary Cowspiracy is going to recognize that the statement we heard from the opposition regarding ecology is basically those talking points, rehashed, warmed over, still flavorless, colorless, like a highly processed vegan goop. It appears my esteemed opponent remains totally uninformed outside of his exceedingly twisted version of the real world. It's as if the tobacco lobby was informing us about the risks of smoking. Fortunately for her and for the planet, vegan propaganda is every day belied by the living truth of regenerative approaches to agriculture, in which the animals we all love are crucial driving elements, offering the primary hope for a resilient future of ecosystems and agricultural systems, landscapes, and people alike. It's ecological reality, not hand-wringing propaganda of urbanite disconnection that remains the arbiter of what's possible. That being said, let's look at a couple of points she made. She says we're in the sixth mass extinction. So is the answer to that to make go extinct hundreds of thousands of farm animals? Whose services could be providing creation of soils and habitat for a massive increase in overall biodiversity. In fact, that's their only hope to save biodiversity. She says the previous 5 mass extinctions were due to carbon. Who can think of, I don't know, maybe even the most recent mass extinction, the 5th one? Does anyone know what that was from? Maybe a meteorite. So no, not from carbon. And even the other ones, there's absolutely no consensus scientifically about carbon being the cause of those in particular. See Bond and Crasby 2017 if you want to check that out. Animal agriculture is not one of the leading causes of the climate crisis as claimed. She threw some numbers at you, but we could also, if you want to go to the UN, they're claiming that friendly beef production practices reduce methane and nitrous oxide emissions while increasing carbon sequestration. That's from a 2011 report, Union of Concerned Scientists. The EPA says it's only 10% of emissions, not the wildly inflated number. The livestock long shadow from 2006 has been debunked over and over. Those numbers are wildly inflated. Even the UN Climate Change Committee report 2014 says methane is basically 2% of the total greenhouse gases emitted. And although the vegans want to pound the methane point, it's not the cow's fault, the methane. It's the plant's fault. Any plants grown that are break down anaerobically release methane, whether it's through a cow or whether it's not. So that's a total red herring. And for people who don't want to abuse animals, they use a lot of red herrings, beat a lot of dead horses, and there's a lot of dogs that don't hunt.
Okay, I go.
Oh, no, abuse the high horse too, sorry.
So, yeah, I know people always say, you know, vegan propaganda. A fact is a fact. You also say that the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, that's debunked also. So you're just saying all these arguments are debunked? And so that you know, like this height of arrogance, that you know all this stuff versus the United Nations, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change?
I didn't say they were debunked.
Yes, you did. You said all the, and livestock's long shadow, I looked into this, there were some issues with it because someone from the milk, the dairy industry got on the board. And that's what happens a lot of times. Someone, like the gas companies, get on Heal the Bay board of directors and start infiltrating so that we can have people who continue to advocate for poor choices for the planet. Animal culture is killing the planet, and it is driving us into an extinction phase, and that is in a book called After the Warming by David Wallace. And there are facts all throughout that state that we are going into an extinction phase. And yes, cows do eat plants, but we make them eat those, the soy and the grain that give them such bad gas, and we have so many of them. If humans wouldn't eat meat from factory farms, we wouldn't have that issue. It's not the poor animal, that the animal is forced to do this. So I'm just going to read a few more things from the debunked things you are saying, but it continues on. The 5 meat and dairy companies combined emit more greenhouse gases than Exxon, Mobil, Shell, or BP. And these are all from the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change, and they are like the mothership for climate. And they are the ones who are saying that the biodiversity is dying. They are also recognizing that the cows, the animal agriculture is one of the leading causes of this. It is also, you know, this whole thing that we ended, we went extinct because of a meteor. I don't know if you know this, but that has been debunked. All the extinctions we have had, and this is in a magazine called Cosmo Primer, that was out of the book After the Warming. It states that that is a falsehood. All of the extinctions we've ever had was from greenhouse gases that have destroyed the planet because it heats everything up, it melts. All the ice caps, we no longer have anything to air condition our planet. And what is happening is the meat and dairy is creating worse for the environment that is creating that. And so, and all of these things, you can say everything is debunked, but then how do you trust any of the governmental studies? We could say that about anything. We could say everything's debunked and just make up what we want so we can live the way we want and do bad things for the planet and to each other and to the animals that we share this planet with. And I think it's the height of arrogance when we think that this food chain, that we are at the top of it and then we can do whatever we want. It's not right. It's not morally right. It's not spiritually right. It's not intellectually right. Thank you.
I would just want to ask a question real quick to Owen. I mean, do you believe that regenerative agriculture with animals would be able to feed billions of people worldwide and produce less emissions than a regenerative agriculture model that is more plant-based?
I think that you'll get to address that in just a second.
Okay.
Each side will now get concluding remarks, and Ellen will be giving
Perfect.
Yes.
concluding remarks.
Please include that.
So you'll have 3 minutes.
Is it time now, or is it time now to do that? Okay, very good. The original meaning of the word meat in many languages means simply food, such as for the Blackfoot tribe, where the word meat means real food, and the word for plants means nothing food. It's only over time that meat has come more specifically to mean that which is indisputably the most universally, cross-culturally preferred food, the gift of life incarnate. Hence, the Sanskrit word for meat means rejoice, expressing what our bodies and our whole genome do when they're graced with this absolutely unsubstitutable forms of essential nutrition. Humans co-evolved tight symbioses with large herbivores over millions of years, and with domesticated farm animals, nearly 10,000 years. Without large-scale regenerative production of animal products, these would basically go extinct. Most of the world's landscapes and agricultures would desertify and collapse. To eliminate any chance of animal suffering, our opponents would erase all realities of their joy. This is not ethics, it's foolishness. As soils go, so go ecosystems and civilizations. Eating is in fact the most profound daily act of ecological citizenship imaginable. The most intimate form of communication between ourselves, our genome, its moment-to-moment epigenetic expression, and the environment. Food is your ecosystem becoming you. When we eat, we swallow the whole world. Eating food that builds soil, that builds biodiversity by using biodiversity, we not only swallow the world and its creatures, but we recreate it anew with every bite. Animals, the most delicious, nutritious form of living hope. Bon appetit. In the final analysis, there is no real-world debate here at all. It's more pretense and conceit that there is even any question of anything remotely like a vegan future. Consider this. While it's true that at any given moment, 2% of the global population is vegan or vegetarian, this is only a snapshot in time. For fully 85% of that 2%, their vegan-vegetarian diet is a mere temporary, usually quite short phase of life. So lifetime math says vegan vegetarians are down to 0.32%, less than 0.5% of the world. Now, at the same time, consider that fully 1% of the global adult population are voluntarily celibate. So putting these facts together, the true future of animal products on the menu becomes crystal clear. Indeed, you are far beyond a mere lost cause when you have more than twice as much chance to get everyone to stop fucking as you do to get them to stop eating meat. Good luck.
Now Brian will give some concluding remarks for the
Ultimately, the decision to keep or remove animals and animal products from our menu, it comes down to what we gain versus what we lose by keeping them on the menu. What we gain by eating animals and animal products is an increased risk of death from our top killers, including heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and cancer. We gain further destruction of our precious resources on our planet, including rainforests, coral reefs, sea life, and our ozone. And we gain a higher and higher body count of innocent, defenseless living beings who want nothing more than to just live their lives, free from harm, free from exploitation, and free from murder. So what do we lose by keeping animals on the menu? Well, we lose our health and our well-being. We lose our planet. It's the only home we have. And we lose our compassion. We lose our humanity. We lose ourselves. This is a lose, lose, lose. I believe that years from now, future humans will look back on this time in history and wonder how we could have ever done this. How could we do this to ourselves? How could we do this to the animals? And how could we do this to their planet? What kind of legacy do we want to leave behind? How do we want to be remembered? Who do we want to be? Enslaving and torturing and raping and murdering animals in 2019 is absolutely unnecessary. So how can we justify continuing to do it? I am of the opinion that every single person in this room, including the three individuals to my left, we are all vegan at heart. We are all kind. We are all compassionate. We all love animals. And we don't want them to die needlessly. So let's not kill them. It's just simply a matter of aligning one's actions with one's values. And so please, I'm asking you to be the type of person that you would want defending you. Thank you.
Like it if everybody could thank our panelists again for agreeing to come here and discuss these topics today. You've had some ballots distributed to you, and you should feel free to vote for the affirmative or negative side of the proposition that was debated today. One of the difficult things to do when you are in the position to decide the outcome of a debate is to judge the content of the debate without the content of your pre-existing beliefs, values, etc. Analyzing arguments in the context of a debate is very difficult. But let me tell you this. Former Secretary of Education Arne Duncan once said that participation, either as an audience member, a competitor, a coach, a judge, etc., in competitive formats of debate was invaluable for obtaining the 5 C's, or 5 skills necessary for success in the 21st century. Those skills include communication, collaboration, creativity, critical thinking, and civic awareness and engagement. And so hopefully you got a broad spectrum today of examples of what kinds of transferable skills can be produced by witnessing debates and participating in them. And as you turn in the ballots, we initially had kind of like a 20-minute opening for a Q&A, but I know that we have less than 20 minutes remaining. So I was hoping that I could say a few things that I noticed about this debate, and then if that spurred any audience questions, we would have a few moments for those. But these are questions to think about for both sides of our panels, both sides of our panelists, and for audience members alike who are making difficult decisions about what goes on your dinner plate now and in the future. So the first issue that we heard about tonight was nutrition. And one of the arguments that the affirmative pointed out was that there's a difference between a vegan diet and a whole food plant-based diet. And one of the questions that I would ask is, the problem then, one of the problems with encouraging people to have the right kind of diet isn't asking them to take meat off the table, but asking them to just eat right. And as somebody who admittedly was, I've kind of dealt with this issue myself. I adopted a vegetarian/vegan diet for about 2 years. And I, like many people who have taken on such a diet, I made poor eating choices still. And so there's an aspect of making the switch in your diet that includes finding the right food choices as well. Perhaps red meat has some benefits. It's obviously contested. But what about non-red meat? What about the way that meat is processed? You know, they say if the slaughterhouse had windows or was made of glass walls, you would all be vegan. And there's good reason for that line of argument. Are things like plant-based burgers really the solution? I would do some research before I concluded that that was the answer, because something like the Impossible Burger or the Beyond Burger, while those may satisfy your urges for eating a burger, they are not necessarily the healthiest choices to adopt. So those are some questions that I would employ you to think about in terms of nutrition. In terms of ethics, one of the things that I thought was really interesting that you often hear about is that humans are indeed animals. And so referencing the divide between non-human animals and human animals is an interesting way to start getting us to think about how we share the planet with non-human animals, and they have just as much of a place here as we do. And so why do we put ourselves above them in so many cases? And perhaps moving to a system where we ethically hunted non-human animals for a variety of purposes could solve. But as the affirmative pointed out, this is not something that could sustainably be done for the size of the population. How do we all become hunters? Do we want to become hunters? And it could, in fact, be a position of privilege to have the time and the knowledge and the training to do all of that. But I'll also say that the case could be made that it's also a privileged position to choose exactly what you eat, when you eat, how you eat, because there are definitely socioeconomic barriers to people removing all meat from their diet. And so to have a vegan lifestyle, as it was called, it's not just a decision to not eat meat. It's a decision to not use animal products whenever non-human animals are exploited in the process, which means a lot of you would have to stop using the hair and body products that you use. You'd have to stop wearing a lot of the things that you wear. It is a lifestyle, not just a diet. And so it takes a lot of effort and also a position in society to take that on as well. So there are lots of ethical dilemmas as well, and sometimes those ethical dilemmas actually extend beyond the conversation of should we adopt a lifestyle or not, and why are some people able to adopt a lifestyle while others remain unable to do so. Finally, you heard a discussion about the environment, and you heard a lot about climate change. It's important to know that methane has a very different relationship with the acceleration of climate change than carbon, because it is often 80 times more concentrated than carbon in terms of impact, but not as often talked about in public discourse. And livestock/landfill use is often credited with being the primary drivers of methane production. So, but when you hear about things like carbon in the atmosphere, that brings us to a problem, which is, how do you solve climate change? And the answer is, well, we don't have it yet. And so when we hear things like we have 10 years left, that's very troubling. The question that I have for both sides is, even if we were to stop putting non-human animal products on our dinner plates in the United States, what stops that from happening elsewhere? And what stops the use and production of non-human animals for a variety of other purposes, like the products that you likely have in your shower and on your person right now? And so if livestock is a major contributor to climate change, we need to do a lot more than change our diets. So these are things that I hope that you'll think about. And I think we have a few minutes for a couple audience questions that you may have for some of the panelists. Yes, over here.
About nutrition, about nutrition, usually the meat alternatives are soy-based.
Yeah.
And I read somewhere that you have to have a maximum amount of serving of soy per day or per week, because soy is not recommended for those women with breast cancer because of the estrogenic effect. So I would like your comment on that.
So like I mentioned earlier, you hear a conclusion from maybe a handful of studies or even one study, and then a news article will run with it. So that study cited with soy was done on a rat model where the rats were fed essentially their body weight in soy a day, and they had negative effects. I challenge you to eat anything in your body weight in a day and not have negative effects. So when you're looking at soy as a balanced part of the diet, you're seeing phytonutrients, you're seeing it actually has anti-cancer properties, it has phytoestrogen, which can bind to estrogen receptors and help balance your hormones. It is full of essential amino acids, and it's great for your diet. I will say genetically modified soy you should avoid, and choosing organic, kind of the heritage soy.
Hey, thanks for coming out. So a lot of my heritage consists of people who did consist of eating plant-based foods. So my grandparents and my great-grandparents and so on, for a long time, they have eaten plant-based foods until, Europeans came in and they colonized my people, and for 400 years, they introduced dairy, meat. So I come from a subtropical climate where plants and vegetation was quite plentiful, so it did not make sense for us to consume dairy and meat. Consuming dairy was really not a thing. So calcium, deficiency, I don't know how I would be of existence, and so is my lineage and my ancestors. So I think it's a false narrative feeding into how millennials, this is a new thing. This has been happening for thousands of years.
Yeah.
There's no society on the anthropological record that's vegetarian. So your particular parents, ancestors, friends, and family may have been, but not the society as a whole. A percentage of them, not the society as a whole.
And there's records of fossilized fecal material having upwards of 200 grams of fiber. And so anyone who eats fiber, the average American will eat about 15 grams of fiber. You're recommended to eat 35. I average about 85. Some days I get 100. For you to eat 200 grams of fiber, you're talking about a 98% plant-based diet. It may not be 100, but that's not to say we can't subsist on that.
No, definitely, but also this, everything before agriculture in terms of bones that have been examined, not one does not have the isotopic signature of a meat-centric diet, even if they eat a lot of plants as fallback foods.
What primitive species of humans did or did not do has no bearing on our morals today in 2019.
That's what created morals.
What created morals?
Our ancestors. We came up with morals.
So was everything our ancestors did moral?
No,
not everything any human does is moral.
What you're saying is meat. Our ancestors, because they ate meat, enabled their brain function to create morals. That's what you're saying, right?
That's right. It created everything we know, culture, language, etc. It wouldn't have happened without.
Our ancestors created a lot of things like slavery. I would argue that what our ancestors did has no bearing on our morals in 2019.
And going back again to the question of what can animal products provide that plants can't provide has not been answered. And I can tell you two things that animal products cannot provide, which is fiber and phytonutrients.
We have another audience question in the back, in the very back.
Yeah, nobody here is arguing don't
this
eat
question
any
is directed at the hunter, and I kind of want to keep the autonomy of humans to, do what they think is natural. But at the same time, I think if we don't need to kill to thrive, then as a society, I think we have to be responsible for how we use our collective knowledge, which means guns and bows and arrows. For thousands of years, we've used it against other humans and other species without any consideration. How would you feel if society said, okay, we're not going to stop you from hunting, but you can't use our knowledge?
I kind of couldn't understand a little bit of that. There was some glitches. But I think that the question, correct me if I'm wrong, you're asking me how would I feel if those tools were removed?
Yeah, society basically taking charge of saying that we don't want to stop you, but this is something society has to decide because we made these tools.
Okay. So I think that my intent when I hunt is to reconnect to what is important to me, and is to reconnect with myself and to source food in a way that also feeds my soul. And so hunting is a unique experience. It's one that I cannot describe to you if you have not done it. It rejuvenates. It, like Owen said, there's a celebration, there's rejoice when I am hunting. So as a society, yes, we need to agree. And I think that everyone in this room agrees that we need to cease animal torture. The question is, when does that torture occur? How do we go about stopping it? And what methods do we have available to us?
So real quick, before we conclude here, we handed out some ballots. I know there were more people here than the number of people who filled out a ballot. So in America, we have many problems.
Really? Voter fraud.
One of them is you don't vote. And if you don't vote, you just accept.
That's right.
If you don't vote, you just accept. There were 11 folks who voted that they were undecided. There were 20 folks who voted that all animal product should not be taken off of the dinner plate, and 38 folks that voted that yes, all animal product should be taken off of the dinner plate. Now, if you want to know how powerful reasoning is, which is possibly one of the greatest tools you have in your arsenal, people latch on to specific parts of arguments and they filter the rest of a conversation through that particular moment or part of an argument. So regardless of which way you voted, it is unlikely that you voted because you thought that that side won everything, and rather you were convinced that one thing was more important than the rest, and that the side that won that part deserved to win your ballot. Or you voted based on what you thought before you came in today, which is also a thing that happens often when we are supposed to be deliberating over how to solve problems. And a problem like this one of how do we create an ethical, sustainable, nutritious diet isn't going to present itself if people just commit to the ideas that they may already have and they refuse to open themselves up to a perspective other than their own. So keep that in mind the next time that you have some controversy and you are asked to take a stance on it. Listen. 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 Thank you.
I'm so excited.